Hello students, parents, and staff. My name is Chris Hickson. I am the student teacher at Miles ELC in their mathematics classroom in the middle school. The topic we talked about on January 9th, 2017 was unit rates. We did a unit rate review. You may notice me pause from time to time, and that it's just to allow for the voice or spoken part and the signed part to happen almost simultaneously. So the first thing we talked about is what is a unit rate. We wanted to define a unit rate because before we can solve problems related to unit rate, we have to come up with a agreed definition. So a unit is something we use to measure. That could be miles, feet, dollars, oranges, and we use unit rates every day. The example I have here is miles per hour, but you may also see dollars per hour or oranges per student or bananas per monkey or something. So with unit rates typically come word problems, and so we're going to go through several word problems, but in order to solve word problems I want to follow 4 important steps. A lot of people see word problems and immediately panic and don't want to do them, but I would encourage you to not do that and instead follow our 4 rules. So first, we must identify the question. Now these word problems are usually pretty long, pretty lengthy, and so it's going to help us if we can go and find the question. This is usually tied to the question mark, so go ahead and underline the question whenever you see it in a problem. Secondly, we need to find the useful information. As I said, these word problems are long and they're full of information that's not useful. They're written by people who are attempting to trick you by giving you a bunch of information that is irrelevant. So we have to find the crucial information. The third thing we need to do is determine the ratio. Now, I want to emphasize that ratio and unit rate are different. Now, a ratio is something that just compares 2 numbers. So we need to find the sets of numbers that are being compared in our word problem. We must take that ratio, that set of numbers, and then convert it into a unit rate, and that's what we'll go through. So in our first example, Malik has to drive approximately about 440 miles away to Las Vegas. If it took him 8 hours to get there, what would his average speed be in miles per hour? So let's go look at our list of 4 things we need to do. And the first one, if you recall, says to identify the question. So let's go ahead and find the question mark here, and we can see it's right there. So it's asking us to find Malik's average speed, specifically in miles per hour. So that is our question. That's what we're going to try to be figuring out, what Malik's average speed was, specifically in miles per hour. Now you're going to watch me fiddle around with the screen there for a second. I'm getting used to the program. By the end of this lesson, you will see I've become a lot more proficient in using it, but for now you get to watch the circus. Anyway, so we identified the question. The next thing we need to do, if we recall, is find the useful information. So again, this is a word problem that's got a lot of information. Some of it isn't that useful to us. For example, is the fact that his name Malik important? Not really. It's not really going to help us do the math. The fact that he drove to Las Vegas is also not really going to help us do the math. But you'll notice there it says 440 miles. Now that is an important piece of information. We are going to need to know how far he drove if we want to find out how fast he was going in miles per hour. we are certainly going to need to know the miles. So we've got 440 miles, and if we keep reading on the second line, it says it took him 8 hours to get there. Well, that's the second part of our unit rate, miles per hour. So let's go ahead and write down the hours. So we've got 440 miles, taking him 8 hours to drive. So what we've actually done here is not only find the useful information, we've also already determined our ratio. Remember, they're looking for miles per hour, and we've already figured out that he went 440 miles in 8 hours. So that's going to be our ratio. So now we have to officially set up our ratio, and it's as simple as doing this. Okay, so now the last part of solving our word problems is we have to determine the unit ratio. So remember that, or unit rate, excuse me. So remember that a unit rate is a ratio, but it's a ratio where the denominator is equal to 1. Now that might seem kind of confusing, but fear not, I'm going to walk you through the first one. So I'm going to go ahead and erase the board I have up there right now, so that way I can write it smaller and do some of the math. So it's important to remember that our ratio, or our unit rate, is miles per hour. So let's go ahead and make sure that we remember that. But for now, we need to convert the denominator to 1. So we're going to divide the denominator, or the bottom number, which is 8, by some other number that's going to make it equal to 1. So 8 divided by what equals 1? Well, if you remember that anything divided by itself is equal to 1, that would mean that 8 divided by 8 is going to equal 1. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So we've divided the bottom, we've got 1. But if we divide the denominator, we must be fair. We must divide the numerator by the same number as well. So if we divided the bottom, 8, we divided it by 8, we must also divide the numerator, or the top, 440, divided by 8. Now, you could use a calculator here. If you're really smart, you can probably figure it out in your head. I am not actually that smart, so I need to either rely on the calculator or the long division. For this one, I'll go ahead and walk through the long division. I won't do that for all of them, but it's good to practice, so I suggest for all of them you go ahead and walk through the long division. So 8 doesn't go into 4, so we're going to put a 0 up there. 8 times 0 is 0. We're going to bring down the 44. 8 goes into 44 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. Let me give myself a little more space here. 5 times 8 is 40. So we're going to subtract 40 from 44. That's going to leave us 4. We're going to bring the last 0 down, and 8 goes into 45 times. And we won't have anything left after that, because 40 minus 40 is going to be 0. So, excuse me, we're going to place the 55 on top, and that's our unit rate. But we've done our math correctly, but we're not finished. This is not the final answer. We've got to recall the units that we had. Right now we've got 55 over 1, but 55 what over 1 what? 55 oranges over 1 banana, or 55 oranges to 1 human? Well, if you look back at our question, you'll see that it's asking for miles per hour. Remember that the per is that line, that division bar between 55 and 1. So we've got 55 miles per as the line, 1 hour. And that's it. That's our unit rate. This is our second example, and this is the same concept, so we're going to go through it the same way. But for now, you'll watch me slowly erase this board. Here I'm just talking about how I need to get better at erasing. But by the end of the video, spoiler alert, I will get better at erasing. Here's my attempt at cutting using the cutting tool, where you'll see I didn't achieve anything and I still had to erase it. Anyway, on to our next example. So this says, Ben Cook broke the world record for texting 160 words in 40 seconds. If he typed at a constant rate, how many words did he type in 1 second? I went ahead and jumped ahead on accident, so I apologize. I'm going to jump back and finish signing the bottom portion of that of those two paragraphs, and then we're going to go look at our 4 steps to determine what we must do first. So the first thing we have to do is identify the question. So we have to figure out what this is asking. Well, if you'll notice in the second paragraph, it says right there, how many words did he type in 1 second? So we've identified the question. Next, we have to find the useful information. Well, it says his name is Ben Cook. Not important. It says that he broke the world record, and while that is fantastic for him, it doesn't actually help us solve the problem. But it does go on to say that he texted 160 words. Now that's important. Let's take note of that. And it also says that it took him 40 seconds to do so. The second paragraph talks about is actually related to the question, so it's not going to help us solve the problem right now. So we do need to write down the useful pieces of information, which is 160 words in 40 seconds. So you'll notice that we've simultaneously done the second step and the third step. We found the useful information, and we've gone ahead and set up our ratio of 160 words to 40 seconds. Now, you could set up the other way around, 40 seconds over 160 words, and some students have asked why we set it up this way. And the reason we did is because setting up the other way would actually be wrong in this scenario, because if you notice the question, it's asking how many words he typed in 1 second. Words in 1 second. So words needs to be on top, because we're trying to change seconds into 1 second, and in order to do that, that's going to be the denominator. So we need to put the 40 seconds on the bottom and then change that to 1 second. So what we're trying to figure out is how many words Ben Cook could text in 1 second. So we must change the 40 to a 1 using division. And in order to do that, we must divide 40 by some number that will give us 1. So 40 divided by what equals 1? Well, you'll recall that anything divided by itself equals 1, so 40 divided by 40 will equal 1. So we'll go ahead and divide that. But remember that we have to be fair. We gotta be equal. So if we divide the denominator, the bottom number, by 40, then we must also divide the numerator, the top number, by 40. So 160 divided by 40. Now, I know that there's a trick. When you've got a 0 on the end of each number, you can go ahead and cross it out. But I'm going to go ahead and show the long division of the full numbers here. If you know the trick, that's great, you can use it. If you don't, I would suggest just doing long division. So, excuse me, 40 does not go into 1, so we'll write a 0 up there. 40 does not go into 16, so we'll write another 0. 40 does go into 164 times, and 4 times 40 is 160, so we'll be left with 0, and that will be our answer. So the 4 we'll go ahead and throw up top. Now we've got 4 something for each something. So we've got to think back to our word problem, and if you recall, it's 4 words per second. The thing they were looking for was words in 1 second. 4 words in 1 second. So Ben Cook can type 4 words in 1 second. So now I'm going to give you another break while I frantically erase this board. So now we've practiced taking ratios and determining unit rates, but now we're going to talk about comparing unit rates. So if you've got 2 unit rates, we can take those and compare them to each other. Maybe we're trying to find which is the bigger rate. Maybe we're trying to find which is the smaller one, or maybe we're trying to find what the best deal is. For example, maybe we're talking about gasoline. So here's our example of gasoline. We've got 2 different places in Tucson. We've got Sam's Club and a Shell station. And notice that Sam's Club is $1.97 per gallon, while the Shell station is $2.25 per gallon. But notice it says gallon. Well, because it says gallon, gallon is singular. That means there's only 1 gallon. That means we already have our unit rates. So Sam's Club is selling a gallon of gasoline for $1. So it's $1.97, or for $1.97. So it's $1.97 per 1 gallon. So that would mean that we can set up Shell's unit rate as well. They're selling their gas at $2.25 per gallon, per 1 gallon. So now we can compare them and determine which one's the better deal. Which would be better for you if you were buying gas? So remember that this means if you wanted to buy a gallon of gas from Sam's Club, it was going to cost you $1.97. But if you wanted to buy a gallon of gasoline from the Shell station, it's going to cost you $2.25. So, as you'll notice, it's actually cheaper at Sam's Club. So that is the better deal. Now remember before I mentioned that you could flip it around and you'll still get a comparable unit rate. Well, that's true here. If for some reason you accidentally flipped these around and wrote gallons to dollars, don't freak out. Don't throw out all of your work. You can still find 2 unit rates that are comparable, and let's go ahead and do that. So let's take Sam's Club. We have $1.97 over 1 gallon. But if we accidentally, for whatever reason, we wrote down 1 gallon over $1.97, we can still convert this to a unit rate. Because notice that this is not a unit rate any longer. This is not a unit rate because the denominator is no longer 1. The denominator is actually 1.97 now. So we must convert it from a ratio, which it is now, to a unit rate. And in order to do that, we must divide 1.97 by 1.97. And after we're done doing that, we must also divide the top 1 divided by 1.97. And I could go through the long division here, but I'm going to be lazy and use the calculator for this one. So we're going to get about 0.50. So now we have to think about our units. So we'll go ahead and I'll just write it again and I'll add the units to it. So remember before we had originally dollars per gallon, but because we accidentally wrote it wrong, wrote it upside down, now we've got a different set of units. So on top we're going to actually have gallons per $1. So what this is saying is if I had $1 and I went to Sam's Club, I could buy 0.5 gallons of gasoline, or half a gallon of gasoline. So as you'll see, we still have a unit rate. But remember, if you write one the wrong way, you must write the other that way as well. So what I mean by that is if for some reason you have Sam's Club as gallons over dollars, that's totally okay, but you must also find the unit rate for the Shell station at gallons over dollars. If you had gallons over dollars for Sam's Club, but you had dollars over gallons for Shell station, you could not compare those two unit rates because they're talking about two different things. Gallons over dollars is talking about how many gallons you can get for each dollar, and dollars over gallon is talking about how many dollars it costs for each gallon. So they're similar, but they're not quite the same. So you can't just compare the two. So whatever you decide to do for the first one, either gallons over dollars or dollars over gallons, you must do the same thing for the other one. Then you can compare them and determine which one's the better deal. So again, I'm going to give you a break, chill out, relax. I'm going to go to town and race in this. Alright, so in our next example, Tammy needs to buy avocados. And this looks like there are two sales going on. At Food City, avocados are 4 for $5. So, Food City will sell you 4 avocados for $5. And at Walmart, they're selling avocados 11 for $13.42. So Walmart will sell you 11 avocados for $13.42. Which store has the better deal? So in order to do this, we're going to need to find the two unit rates, one for Food City and one for Walmart, and then compare them. So let's go ahead and find Food Cities. So what's the useful information in regards to Food City? Well, it says that it's 4 avocados for $5. For $5. That's our important information. So now let's go ahead and convert this into a ratio. 4 avocados. I'm going to write AB for avocado. 4 avocados per $5. Now, we're going to need to remember that we did avocados over dollars because when we go to do Walmart, we can't flip it around and do dollars over avocados, otherwise we won't be able to compare our answers. So, the first thing we need to do is convert this ratio of avocados to dollars into a unit rate of avocados per dollar. And at this point, a student during class raised his hand and asked, wouldn't it be easier to do dollars over avocados? And it might be easier, but if you'll notice in our question, it's not actually saying which unit rate it's asking for. It's just asking you to find the better deal. So we can do avocados per dollar, or we can do dollars per avocado. Either way, we're going to find two unit rates that we can compare and find the better deal for. So anyway, we're going to use avocados per dollar. So we must convert the $5 into $1. So the first thing we're going to need to do is divide 5 by 5, which is going to give us 1 in the denominator. But remember that if we divide in the denominator, we must also divide in the numerator. So 4 divided by 5, and I'll go ahead and do the long division for you guys here. So 5 does not go into 4, so we'll have a 0. 0 times 5 is 0. If we do 4 minus 0, 4 is left. So now we'll place a decimal and add a 0. 5 goes into 48 times. So with nothing left, with no remainder. So 0.8 avocados per $1 is our unit rate. I apologize for my sloppy dollar sign there. I'm actually writing with my finger, but anyway. What this means is that for each dollar that we have to spend, we can buy 0.8 avocados from Food City. So let's go ahead and hang on to that answer, that unit rate. I'm going to write it down. If I would suggest you write it down as well, but if you don't, I will have it. And we need to now determine Walmart's unit rate so that we can compare them. And while I erase, you could go ahead and start the work for Walmart while I erase all this information. And just remember that we set up avocados per dollar. So when we set up Walmart's ratio, we must also set up avocados per dollar, not dollars per avocado. So now you'll notice that I just figured out how to erase the entire slide or entire little pad there, which was a great breakthrough in technology for me. So anyway, the information relevant to Walmart is that they're selling 11 avocados for $13.42. So now we need to take that information and set up our ratio. And recall that we were doing avocados $2. So now, in order to change this ratio into a unit rate, we must divide the denominator by itself. So 13.42 divided by 13.42 will equal 1. And once we're done, we must also divide the top by 13.42. And I'm not going to go through the long division here. I am going to grab the calculator in an effort to save a little bit of time. So the real answer was 0.821 on and on, but we're just going to leave it at 0.82. So what this is saying is that Walmart, for each dollar I have to spend, I can buy 0.82 avocados. So now I have to remember Food City's unit rate and Walmart's unit rate and compare them to see which is a better deal. So Walmart is offering us 0.82 avocados per $1, while Food City is offering us 0.80 avocados per $1. So what this is saying is if we had $1 to spend and we went to Walmart, we could buy $0.82 avocados. But if we had that same dollar and we went to Food City, we could only buy 0.80 avocados. So which one is the better deal for your dollar? Yep, it's going to be Walmart because they're offering you more avocados or more of a part of an avocado than Food City is. Okay, so the next two slides are homework, but I'm going to go through them anyway. So this one says, according to the United States Census Bureau, in 2013, Arizona spent approximately $36,000 for every 5 students in public education. What is the unit rate of dollars spent per student in 2013? So the question is, what is the unit rate of dollars spent per student in 2013? The useful information, well, it starts off talking about the United States Census Bureau. Not that important what we're doing. 2013, not important. Arizona, but then eventually in the second line it says that Arizona spent $36,000. Notice the question says that we need to find dollars spent per student, so the $36,000 needs to be on top. And per student, so the student needs to be on bottom, and it says that there were 5 students. Okay, so they spent $36,000 on 5 students. So that's our ratio, but we must convert our ratio to a unit rate. So the unit rate must have a denominator of 1, which means we're going to have to change that 5 into a 1. So 5 divided by 5 is going to give us a 1. What we do to the bottom, we must also do to the top. So we'll divide 36,000 by 5. And I could go through all the long division, but I'm just going to punch this one into the calculator to, again, save some time. And our answer is 7,200, or 7,200. And what this says is that Arizona spent $7,200 on each student in the year 2013. That seems like a lot of money, but to actually know if it's a lot of money, we have to compare it to something else. We have to have something to compare it to. So that's where the next slide comes in. But we need to hang on to this 7,200 over 1 dollars per student, because that's going to be useful when we're comparing. So I'll write it down in case you don't, and we'll move on to the next slide. So, according to the same report, in 2013, New York, the state highlighted in red, spent approximately $99,000 for every 5 students in public education. What is the unit rate of dollars spent per student in 2013? So this is the same thing. We're talking about dollars per student, so we have to skim and find our dollars, which is 99,000, and place that over our number of students, which is 5, saying that New York spent $99,000 per 5 students. Once again, we must divide both the denominator, bottom number, and the numerator, the top number, by 5. In the bottom, 5 divided by 5 will be 1. And in the top, once again, I'm going to depend on the calculator to save us some time. So, New York spent $19,800 on every student, or per student. So now what we're going to do is compare the two states. So in New York, they spent $19,800 per student, and in Arizona, they spent $7,200 per student. Let me go ahead and write the units here. I'll just write them once, since they're the same. So again, in New York, for each student they spent $19,800, while in Arizona, for each student they spent $7,200. So which state paid more for each student? Yep, it was New York. New York spent a lot more for each student in 2013. And that's the end of the unit rate review. And before I go, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to either leave them in the YouTube video or come to me with them. I am looking for feedback. Again, this is the first time I've done this. I'm not sure if this is something you guys are looking for or want, but feel free to give me criticisms or feedback. That would be really helpful to help me make the stream better, make it something that you guys want. Okay, thanks.